I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is the Holyoke City Council's Finance Committee. To my left is Councilor at Large James Leahy. To my right is Councilor at Large Mike Sullivan. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Joe McGivern, the chair of this committee. We have a decent-sized agenda, but I think we're set up to move it pretty quickly, and we appreciate everybody coming in this evening. The first item on the agenda refers to minutes. I would suggest we keep on the table.
Yeah, make a motion to keep it on the table.
All those in favor? Any opposed? Item number 2, all financial orders come under my name that the amount of $279.10 be authorized from the Board of Health's advertising appropriation in fiscal year 2018 for services rendered in fiscal year that were unencumbered in 2017. Motion to take it off the table. All those in favor? Any opposed? So moved. I did talk to Brian from the Board of Health this afternoon, and he is requesting that this is a bill that should be paid. It's an advertising bill. Typically, when the Board of Health was advertising, it was coming out of the mayor's budget. At the end of the year, the mayor had run out of money, and Brian had made a request to transfer some money around within his budget. It didn't happen in a timely fashion, so he's asking both for permission to use this year's appropriation to pay for last year's bill.
Make a motion to pass it.
Motion made second to pass it and recommend to the full city council at the next regular meeting that this, both the request for paying a prior year bill be paid and this money be used from the line item as written. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved.
Make a motion to take item 3 off the table.
Also introduced by myself that the amount of $513.19 and be authorized from the legal department's records recording fees and appropriation for fiscal year 2018 for services rendered in fiscal year 2017 that were unencumbered. Is there anybody here from the law department? Mr. Pear, city solicitor. Sorry, I didn't even see you walk in. Paul, you want to walk us through this real quick?
Sure. This is a bill from the prior fiscal year. It's for stenographer services for a deposition that was taken back in, I believe, March 13th of 2017. And the amount $513.19 is proposed to be taken from the recording fees line item. I believe there's approximately $1,200 remaining in that line item. We don't expect to exhaust that by the end of the fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. Would there be any discussion or any questions for our city solicitor?
Motion to approve it.
Motion made second to approve. All those in favor? Any opposed? So moved. Thank you, Paul. Item number 4.
Make a motion to take item 4 off the table.
This is an amount of $1,605.
Whoa. No. 4, it's DPW department.
What are you looking at?
Where'd you get the money?
$95 be authorized.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is from the DPW's professional services, $95, and from professional services appropriation for fiscal year 2018 for services rendered in fiscal year 2017 that were unencumbered at the end of the year. I did take up item number 4, but I don't see Mike McManus here yet. He should be here shortly, so if we could lay it on the table and go to the next.
Table it?
Actually, lay 4, 5, and 6 on the table to Mike. And the water department is actually meeting right now, and they'll be here also for one of the items. So if we could keep 4, 5, and 6 on the table. All those in favor? Any opposed? So moved. Item number 7. Motion made second to remove from the table for the purpose of discussion. All those in favor? Any opposed? This is an appropriation transfer request for $3,012.64. Coming from line item for patriotic events, the entire amount, going to pay head clerk the entire amount. The request is from our Veteran Affairs Department. On that motion to receive and adopt, could we have our Veteran Affairs Director please come forward? He says, if you can come in and sit down, or you can use the mic, whichever you want. Just make sure you get a green light. And thank you for coming down.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for having me.
If you could just run us through it.
Sure, real simple. I'm projecting out the needs for the fiscal year for the department and realized that this line item was short that amount of money. Looks like the projection from last year just didn't include like a step increase and having the individual there 25 hours a week all year long. That position was vacant here and there, so there just wasn't enough money there. Luckily, the American Legion post up on Sycamore Street donated $1,000 to this line item to offset some of the transfers that we're going to be doing.
Okay. That sounds like a good thing, but can you explain that?
So this year, I was contacted by the Holyoke Gas and Electric to let me know that some of our flags were not presentable, the ones that we typically run up and down, up to the Soldiers' Home and down and on the bridges. They usually run them between this time frame and about November, and a lot of them were unserviceable. You shouldn't display them. They all needed to be retired, so I had to order 150 flags at $13 a piece. Which is going to really hit me hard in this particular line item. So they donated $1,000 to offset that, and there's a balance remaining to cover what's
Okay.
requested.
I just want to make sure on the donation part, it's great. And
Yep.
There's nothing wrong with that. It's a gift to the city. Did that come through the auditor's department and get
It did.
accepted by the city council?
I didn't realize that would be accepted by the city council.
Okay, the auditor's department may not know that too with
Okay.
the more green people that are over there. It's something I think we need to catch up to, but is that money in this line item?
Not as of yet.
Not as of yet. Okay, so what's in front of us, is there that much money in patriotic events?
More than that, yes.
More than that?
Yes.
And
We're,
then you're gonna get the 1,000 back in?
Yes.
Okay. And you think that'll carry you through the year with the flags and?
yes, the only two other events we have for the rest of the year is the B-17 Memorial, and then we have the Memorial Day services before the fiscal year is over.
Would you do me a favor in case I forget? Will you just let Bellamy know that, to double check, you know?
Absolutely.
If that gift needs to be channeled through a vote by the city council?
Sure.
Just to make sure we're on the same page. Thank you. Any other discussion? Counselor Leahy?
I just want to say that I'm going to make a motion to approve this. I think what you're doing is a fantastic job. I also, I love the post you put on the Hello Holyoke Forum. You get everybody involved and included, and your communication skills are top-notch, so I just have nothing but praise. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other discussion? There is a motion on the floor to approve and recommend to the next city council meeting to adopt the use of these monies. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous, so moved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that it for him?
I believe that's it. Yep.
Okay, I make a motion we go back and take item 4, 5, and 6, if you want it as a package or individually.
But when we do them individually,
Okay.
I think there might be some unique questions.
Take a
But
motion.
We'll do them quick.
4.
Item number 4 is introduce the amount of, hang on,
1,665
I know, I'm on the wrong page.
and 95, two of them.
That's a misprint here or something.
Yeah, I think it's reading awkward, but Mike, if you want to come in, and we're gonna get rid of 3 of these right now, and then I gotta talk to you for a second about the last item. But this is a request, the way it's reading is $1,665, the DPW Department of Professional Services, and $95 be authorized from professional services for an appropriation in fiscal year 2018 for rendered services in 2017. Can you
I cannot.
fill us in?
I think that was submitted by Bellamy. And my first take on it when I read it was that it was just
Oh.
bookkeeping cleanup. I read it as unencumbered, unused funds.
Actually, I think I'm a step ahead of you. Attached to this is an invoice bill from Grin and Barrett Studios, which I think the city council is fully aware of the discussion of this bill not being paid in a timely fashion. And even though we had the request or approval, this is the first time we've had it from the auditor. You may.
So then you know what that's about.
Well, it is your budget, so I think you should know about it.
I think it was a bill that needed to be paid.
Yes.
And it was a place where there was available budget that wouldn't be used to pay
Okay,
the
so
bill.
you signed off and you're comfortable with it?
I'm comfortable
Okay.
with that transfer, yeah.
And we know what the bill is about. We're just gonna double check it quickly.
Balance due 165, balance due all invoices 4,000.
That I don't know. We invited Mike in for this, which I think is yes and no part of it, but I think we should have also invited the mayor's office in.
My understanding is there were 2 years' worth of invoices that were unpaid and needed to be paid.
So
then
we're gonna take $1,665 from one account and then $95 from another to pay towards the 4,154.65. And we're taking out of DPW to pay for city council stuff?
Well, it's not.
Unless it
it's a-
represents the
this-
one that fell.
This was never in the city council budget, which a lot of people seem to think it was. This is the city picture that some still hang here, the rest of them are in storage. Used to hang out in the hallways, was always out of the mayor's budget, out of the, maybe the building budget for the city hall, but not directly out of the city council budget. And my recollection when Rory Casey came in from the mayor's office was 1 year was not paid, and we went to take the pictures for this year, last year, which were not taken. And I don't know if, I don't know how you can get billed if the work wasn't done.
Motion table.
Question for the chair.
The balance this invoice is only for the 1,665. And then it does say that there are other invoices, so the other invoices are not before us.
This is balance due 4,000.
No. Well, it says this invoice, which is all we're paying for, is, one invoice for the 1,665, which is the request on the,
But if it's 2 pictures, 1,665 times 2, would it equal 4,000? I can't vote for this tonight.
well, Grin and Barrett has been waiting for their money for a year and a half to no fault of the city council, and I appreciate that. But I also appreciate Grin and Barrett as a vendor who deserves the money that they have coming to them. I don't know if there's a way we can get our answers by the next city council meeting and finally take care of this?
Yeah, I'll vote for it if we get the answers, but,
Okay.
I mean, right now, with $4,000, and
We're only voting for 1,665.
but with that balance due, I'm not so comfortable doing it.
I think there's an issue with it being due in a previous fiscal year.
Yes,
as well.
that we understand. That's not we have to vote, that's like a double vote where we have to take this year's monies and make sure that we allow them to be paid for services in a prior year. This is the first 3 items we've been doing that. Pleasure of the committee?
Do we know if it's for prior year bill? Is it also for fixing the one that fell and is broken still in back? I mean, trying to figure out the breakdown of everything.
When did it fall? I didn't know one fell.
Yeah, there was one that was right there, sitting in back, it's broken.
I believe these are pictures from the previous years. It's not fixing the one that fell. My understanding is there was one picture that was taken and delivered and never paid for. There was another picture that was taken but hasn't been delivered yet. And then there's, I don't know if it's the sitting fee for the previous year.
The 1,665 is for one picture, which includes the business session and image, which was the sit-in fee, the mounting and the printing, the frame and the framing, and the glass that goes over the frame, which is broken down and itemized here, and that totals the 1,665. the the 95 is itemized on this second bill here. It's,
We even have two different numbers in one item?
for the transfer part, I mean, for the appropriation transfer and paying it, yes. The 95 looks for like an additional sitting that took place at a different time at the studio. I can guess some city councilor wanted their picture retaken. I don't know. But the 1665 is the number that we've been told for some time now. And it's due. I'll listen to the committee.
Well, I think we've waited too
Ah,
long. They're owed, there's no question they're owed the 1665.
Just make a motion to pass it pending more information on it, so when it goes to the full city council, if we don't get the information, you can always send it back.
Okay. What information do we need so we can get the right people in next week?
What that $4,000 is for?
Okay.
I think
I'll
detailed
get the answer
breakdown,
to that,
right?
but
Yeah.
we're not voting on that. But we will find out what the other invoices are, if there's more than one. Any other questions or any other answers that we need? Okay, any other discussion? On a motion to adopt, refer to the full city council, all those in favor? Any opposed? So moved.
Take item 5 off the table?
Motion made second, take item 5 off the table. All those in favor? Any opposed? Mike, this is from the DPW Senior Civil Engineer, $28,000 to be transferred to the DPW City Engineer Assistant Superintendent. Same amount. Signed off by the mayor, yourself, and approved by the auditor. Motion is to take it up for discussion. Can you run us through this?
So last year, the city council approved budget for 2 senior civil engineers in lieu of a senior civil engineer and a city engineer. And we advertised and we could not find any, viable candidates for that second senior civil engineer position. One is currently filled. So what this would be is transferring money that's been unused and that won't be used in that second position into the city engineer line item to hire a city engineer / assistant superintendent.
Is
At the
the
time,
assistant superintendent a city engineer?
yes.
I mean, currently.
That's the job title, is city engineer
It is,
/
okay.
assistant superintendent. So at the time, there was a few months left in this current fiscal year, and that dollar amount was to cover from February until the end of the year.
Okay, so you're still looking to fill the position?
Correct. We haven't, we've advertised for it, we've gotten a number of resumes, but we haven't interviewed anybody or made any promises.
And does this mean the senior civil engineer is going to stay vacant?
No, the second senior civil engineer, well, that would stay vacant, and we wouldn't look for funding that going forward.
Any other discussion?
Make a motion to approve it? Second.
Motion made second to approve. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor? Any opposed? So moved. Item number 6.
Motion to take it off the table?
Motion made second to take off the table for the purpose of discussion. All those in favor? Any opposed? So moved. Mike, this is $2,221.65 from the department's professional services account, $78. Who's writing these things up? Be authorized for professional services, and $95 be authorized for professional services appropriation in fiscal year 2018 for services rendered in 2017 that were unencumbered at the end of the 2017 year. Are you familiar with this one?
No, I'm not familiar. I mean,
You gotta-
I took that as the cleaning of the books, the first one for the
Okay.
pictures.
Here's the rest of Counselor Leahy's questions about the $4,000. Got invoices for the rest of the, okay. Reconsider our action and put both of these on the table? All those, we have two requests here, and Mike McManus was brought in because they were coming through his accounts, which he generously said, I think they can use this for an expenditure that's roughly related because you are in charge of the building, but I think it's really should have been something transferred into the mayor's budget, and someone here from the mayor's office, although I will admit the mayor's office was not invited in. So what we'll do is, if we can lay these on the table, I'll talk to the mayor and Rory Casey and have someone either next Tuesday tell us what's going on, or,
So motion to reconsider item 4? Is that what we're doing?
correct. Motion made, second, reconsider item number 4. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved, and to take item 4 and 6 and to table them.
Second.
All those in favor? Any opposed? So moved. Mike, those are your direct ones. I believe you told me you wanted to be here for the carbon discussion with the water department? No?
I mean, what I was thinking was talking more about the contract that we have with Suez, where we are with sewer collections, the sewer shut-off program,
Yes.
and then we had talked about the sewer fee, but you
Okay.
said that was an ordinance.
That's going to be an ordinance.
Right.
And that's because the rate is set by ordinance. So that discussion should take place on the same evening, which is related.
What I wanted to do was just provide an update of kind of where we are with the sewer fund.
Okay. You can do that in the ordinance committee?
Do that in ordinance, yeah.
Well, we don't have anything in front of us, and by our rules, we can only act on what's in front of us. And the water department is coming in this evening, and it doesn't really tie in with the sewer fee. It ties in with the letter that Ryan didn't put in the folder. And it's you and I had talked a little bit about it. I thought maybe you were just interested in the I don't know if I'm saying it right. It's a multi-municipal agreement for the purpose of a carbon, I'm going to say it wrong, but it deals with forestry and preservation of trees and stuff. And
Right, they can sequester carbon and sell the credits.
Okay.
And I don't want to step on Dave Conti's.
No. He's going to be here. I just wanted to let you know that he will be here. They had a meeting that started at 6:30. And he said they'll be here by 7:30. Okay, so I'm just giving you a heads up if you're interested. If not, I thank you.
Thank you.
Michael, where do we stand on the order that I followed for the street sweeping calendar?
We're currently sweeping the streets, and Suez is the one who manages that. I need to
followed
check
all
with
of them
them.
So people know which neighborhoods are gonna be done.
Okay. I'll check with Suez and find out, what they have. I know they have 2 crews. They have their own crew, which sweeps downtown. And then they also hire out, I believe they use Mohawk for out in the country.
I thought we stopped using, I thought we took that out of the contract. I thought the city started doing street sweeping.
Well, Suez is under contract for doing street sweeping. And there was a line in the budget for street sweeping, but it was in their contract.
Okay. Right, no, I filed that on behalf of a constituent. I just want to get back to that person.
Okay.
Thank you. And Councilor Bacon will be calling you pretty shortly about the sewer stuff. If we could, the committee could indulge me and just skip over item 8 and go to item number 9.
Sure. Make a motion to take item 9 off the table?
All those in favor? Any opposed? Chief Pond, if you could come in, thank you for coming down. This is a motion to take firefighters, $3,994.94. Play that number tonight, Michael. From their salary account to injured on duty, the same amount. I think we all understand why we're doing this. But Chief, we've done this with the police department, and we'd like to do it with you in terms of the protocols of how a firefighter requests the injured on duty or is injured on duty, what the firefighter goes through and what the administration goes through to monitor that. If you could run us through it.
No problem. Thank you for having me. To start with, that's a general accounting practice for that amount. And just in fact, before I go through the procedure of how we do our IOD, that money comes directly out of firefighter line items for injured on duty and goes into another account because it's a tax-free benefit, and that's an accounting practice that's used in the city, so that's solved. As far as IOD itself, it's injured on duty. If a firefighter gets injured on duty, they file an accident report. We do an investigation. I get reports from the firefighter. If there's any witnesses, a deputy chief's report. It all comes to my office. That firefighter is carried on personal sick leave until I do an investigation to determine that he should be flipped over to injured on duty. Our third-party administrator is Metatrol. They assist me with all of that information, and from that point, we move them to injured on duty, and then that's when their pay gets removed from that line item and put into injured on duty. When a firefighter is injured, they can go directly to the emergency room or go to the work connection at the Holyoke Medical Center, and then they give me a full report as well on what the injury is.
Chief, they
That
can
point.
go or they have to
They
go?
have to go.
And within, what's the time frame?
If it's on a weekend, typically they'll go the first Monday that
Unless they go
work
to the
connection
ER.
opens, unless they go to the ER. If it is during the work week, then they'll go during the work day. If it's past, I believe, 4:30 at the Holyoke Medical Center, then they can go to the ER that night or go the next morning to the work connection.
Any questions for the chief? Counselor Reagan?
Oh, sorry. Mike's had his hand up first.
Counselor Sullivan? Sorry.
Chief, so if somebody's injured on duty, is a report made out at the time of the injury, the nature of it, like, how it happened, or is it just, how does that happen?
The firefighter does their own injury report, but the officer logs the injury, and they'll write up a report. The deputy chief also writes up a report for the injury. So, as I said, once they turn in their injury report, I already have the other stuff from the deputy chiefs and the officer to do the investigation to make sure it's injured on duty.
Okay, so if somebody injured themselves at home over the weekend and then came in, is there safeguards in place to make sure that they couldn't be report something that didn't happen while they were on duty, that somebody could come in and file a report?
I would say yes, but I don't really know. I'm not there to see what the injury is. If there's no witnesses, I guess somebody could make up something. I highly doubt it, but.
Counselor Reagan?
Thanks. Chief, do you have anybody who's out injured being paid, but they're not out under injured on duty? They're out under something else being paid?
No.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Counselor Tomlin?
Thanks, Chief, for coming down. Just a quick question. I know, keeping people healthy is important. Usually, overtime comes into play here when you got a lot of people out hurt. On the average, like in a month or a couple months, what is the average you have out on injured on duty about? If you could give me an estimate.
It can vary. I will let you know this. When I took over 6 years ago, there were 15 firefighters out injured on duty. Right now, I'd say our average is anywhere from 2 to 5 within a month. Right now, we currently have 3 injured on duty.
Okay. Do you have any that are long-standing that are, in a process of possibly being, retired through injury?
Yes. If they're injured on duty and their injuries are deemed them to go out on disability, typically they'll work on light duty until the retirement board receives their application for disability, and then it goes through the process for PRAC and whatnot. We have, I believe we currently have 3 people on light duty, but not all are going out disability. I'm just saying, we currently have 3 people that work-related injuries and they're on light duty doing office work.
Now, before they get back to work, do they have to go through some kind of physical with the hospital or with somebody in the department?
Definitely, they work connection clears them and their physician that they're seeing for the type of injury.
Okay,
Yes, I'm not going to take them back unless they're cleared.
good. Okay, thank you.
Counselor Sullivan.
Chief, how long can someone stay on light duty?
They can stay on light duty. There's no set time limit for light duty. We try to get the turnaround time within 3 to 4 months, if that's possible. Light duty is just contractually, if somebody's injured on duty for 60 days, I can bring them back for light duty if their doctor has light duty restrictions. So that's when we bring them back after 60 days. And then as they're on light duty, they have an opportunity to go to a physician or any treatments to rehabilitate, to come back to duty. It's actually a good way to segue back into duty, and it assists us with a lot of the technical upgrades that we're doing with digital documents and whatnot. So
Okay.
it's been helpful.
But is there a limit, a time limit to how long they can stay on light duty?
No. So that's why it's just, if they can't come back to full duty and that's what their physician says, that's when we go down the disability path. So that takes forever.
Got it.
I can't even get into
No,
that.
Got it, yeah.
Any further discussion? Any further questions for the chief? Chief, I appreciate you coming in. If my understanding is correct, what we learned doing these similar type transfers, we understand why we're doing them, but we learned that these type of transfer can occur every pay period.
Yes.
So we're just gonna see them and see them and see them. So unless there's something unusual, we're gonna try to pass them on the floor, if I can answer all questions when they first come in, so we know what's going on. One of the questions that we frequently hear, I didn't quite hear it this evening, was, it's a running total, and I know it changes quickly, but how many firefighters do you usually have average injured on duty?
As I said, it could be anywhere now between 2 to 5, if it's a 30-day
Just,
period. Currently, we have 3 that are injured on duty, so.
Thank you. If that's it, motion on the floor is to adopt and recommend to the city council with the answers to these questions. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Thanks, chief.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
See how easy that was? We go back to item number 8. Motion is taken off the table. All those in favor? Any opposed? So moved. This is two things, and that's why we put it in committee. We've already have got the answers from the chief of police on the injured on duty questions, very similar and almost same procedure as the fire department. But this request was compounded by the auditor, not by the chief, for $4,841.52 from patrolmen to injured on duty $4,341.52, and also $500 to a stipend. I talked to Chief Neiswanger today. He did answer my question. I know Councilor McGee did have a big question, and none of us could answer it when this was received at the full city council meeting. But the stipend is it's somewhat of a regular situation, but it's for when a officer is in records performing as a supervisor, because there is no supervisor directly attached to the records division. And there are times when the chief needs to take an officer that's working there and make them acting out of grade would be I think the terminology that we use. I asked the chief how often this happens, and the total amount in the line item for the entire fiscal year is $1,000, and it covers 26 pay periods. So the stipend is not $500 for a pay period, it's just what he needs to get through the end of the fiscal year. in the, that's the answer from the police department. Is there any discussion? Any other questions? On a motion to adopt and approve, all those in favor? Any opposed?
No.
So moved, 4-1. That, just so you know, I didn't say it is contractual. Item number 10.
Make a motion to take it off the table.
Motion made second to receive, take off the table, item number 10 for the purpose of discussion and a recommendation for the city council. This is an amount of $13,797,581, if I read that right, I doubt it. And I don't think it was printed right.
Right.
Huh?
13,797,581.
581. For the purpose of paying for the cost of boiler and window replacement at the Kelly Elementary School in West Holyoke, window replacements at the Sullivan School on Jarvis Ave, and the Morgan School in South Holyoke on South Bridge Street. We have with us this evening Whitney Anderson and company to come in and walk us through this. Whitney, welcome, and whoever you like to bring in, come on in. You might as well come in and take a seat, and it's a lot more comfortable.
Can I ask you a question, Joe?
Yeah.
So is this approving a bond, or is this actually us taking, the way it's written, it sounds like we're taking $13 million out of our bank account. But it doesn't say that, so is this,
Bond language. Is the bond attached?
I'm sorry. The way, I'm reading the agenda, and sometimes I should get into the habit of reading the actual order. This is the amount that I said, and it is, in front of us, is bond language. We're being asked to authorize the bond, which also will take a mayor approval, and then the city treasurer and the auditor would have the right to carry out the actual bond
the reason I
itself.
say that is because people, this is all posted, so people are reading this at home, and it just says that the city of Hoyoke appropriate that amount, and it doesn't talk about approving bond language. I think that in the future, this needs to be better written.
I think we have an order by Council President to talk about tightening up the way bond language and the way grants and stuff are written, and more important, the way that they are administered. The appropriation amount is, the bond could be 20 years, could be 30 years, whatever it could end up being. But we are appropriating by passing this, because eventually in the budget will be a line item to pay the annual principal and interest and everything. So the appropriation is correct, but it is, I agree with Councilor Leahy, it is confusing, especially if you just look at the agenda that's posted. And we understand. We have to get this language through the auditor, and we understand, Whitney. But more important, you're here to tell us why we have to do this, why we should do this.
Turn your mic on.
If there's a button on your mics, if you're gonna talk, you just make sure the green light comes on, and you're good.
We have some information that I'd like to have distributed to you. This is Janice Mamayak. She is our designer for this project, the city's designer.
Thank you, and welcome, Janice.
Janice has the specifics regarding the 4 projects, and David Billings is the OPM.
Great, thank you.
David, thank you, and welcome.
Thank you.
David has a summary of the projects, the financial summary.
Thank you.
And what we have here is an opportunity to partnership with the Mass School Building Authority for purposes of some replacements of windows, as Chairman McGivern has stated, and boilers at Kelly School. The windows are at Kelly, Sullivan, and Morgan schools. And you can see some pictures from the diagrams there. On the first page, you have a picture of the boiler at Kelly. There are 2 boilers there that are original to the structure from 1974. And they've done well, but they're at the end of their useful life. The replacements the state requires, if we should be able to participate in this system, a call for high-efficiency boilers and things in which would be reducing the effective operating costs of those systems. The second page shows you the windows that you would find at Kelly School, including the dome, which is in the central part of the structure, which currently leaks and has some issues with solar gain, the sun shines through there and it makes that inner pod, which connects all the classrooms in that area, extremely hot. The outside of on the second page as well, on the right-hand photo, you can see a picture of some windows as well as a facade beneath the windows. The facade is failing. It's a cementous kind of a marble material that was plastered over some plywood underneath it originally from the structure. And because that is adjacent to the windows and part of the window system, that would be replaced as well, and it would give the building an entire new look, which is, it's a high population area for the city as far as students are concerned, and it really would do justice to the outside of the exterior. The third page is a picture of Sullivan School. Sullivan School is a unique school comprised of 3 different buildings, an original structure and 2 additions. And what you see there is primarily on the rear of the structure, where we have put up approximately 20 years ago an iron fence, which has kept a lot of the foot traffic away from the building. But what we have there is a series of windows that over the course of time have been broken and replaced with plexiglass or Lexan. And over the course of time, these are very stable products, but they're not energy efficient. The biggest asset to us in the maintenance department as far as being able to preserve the integrity of a window system is that they don't break once somebody throws another rock at it. So, but as far as the ultraviolet light degrades the actual replacement, and it's not energy efficient. The framework of the windows too as well they conduct everything that's outside to the inside. So on a cold day, it's cold around the frames, just as you would with older windows that you experience with your home or something like that. And on a hot day, just the opposite is true. The heat comes in. We also would, as part of this project, incorporate screens, vandal screens, which also would serve to intercept and prevent stinging insects and bugs from coming into the structure as well. But most important, it would preserve the glass and the integrity of the glazing. The next page is a picture of Morgan School, and this is a summary that gives you a good perspective in all these instances of the number of square footage that are in the buildings, the age of the buildings, what population they currently serve, and a high-level summary of what we have here. Now, Janice's team has spent the time, and I appreciate the summary she's given us. She also has some detailed information that could be provided as well to go further into it, but that's a good overview of what we have as far as the current analysis. This information has been submitted to the MSBA based on the statement of interest, which was filed on the city's behalf in order to participate in this program, and we're currently in the design feasibility stage.
Thank you, Whitney. Is it best to go through everything and then ask questions?
Whatever you prefer.
What do you think, Janice?
Why don't we just keep going, and then we'll pick up questions later, because I won't be long.
Okay.
I won't be long. So the 11 by 17 was just some images of what it could be. These are early design, so we're not looking at colors or anything right now. It's just scoping out the project. So the first one is at Kelly School. The Kelly School has a number of 2-story classrooms, and that framework for the windows are the whole height. So we're looking at a window wall system that has some infill panels. And as Whitney mentioned, whether it's at the classrooms or at the bridge, there's a lot of interface with existing soffits and panels that you're getting a lot more than just new windows. You're getting new windows, new doors, new soffits, new metal panels. In the case of the bridge at that is at the Kelly School, where that epoxy aggregate on plywood is just degraded. It's a metal panel system throughout. So I know we're talking about big projects here, but you're getting a lot more, like I said, more than windows. The second image is at the Morgan Elementary, but it's indicative of all 3 schools, where in the larger rooms, like your cafeteria, your gymnasium, massive walls of glazing that bring in a lot of solar gain. We're looking at a cow wall-like system, translucent, so it's really gonna deal with the energy efficiency as well as heat gain, yet allow some operable light so that you can have some natural ventilation as well. At the last picture, at the Sullivan is just representative of that school's more punched openings. They're smaller windows, so much more focused in that application.
Questions, or David, do you want to?
Sure, just go through the finances. This is part of the Mass School Building Authority's Accelerated Repair Program. It's through their, the SOI process, and then going through the MSBA staffing. We put together a schematic design with design and specifications. We went through a estimating, third-party estimating process, put together a full budget with design and contingencies and construction costs through, and submitted that to the MSBA. We have had conversations with the MSBA staff. They're finding that the submissions that we have meet their criteria. The MSBA is presenting this to the MSBA board on April 10th for the MSBA, yes, tomorrow, authorization of the full program. So the MSBA is fully behind the scope and the cost estimates for this project.
And so what you see here is a summary of the 4 different projects. Kelly has 2 projects, boilers and windows, and then it's broken down as far as the project cost, the grant appropriation, and the cost to the city of Holyoke. And with the top right, this is a rate in which we all know that the MSBA generically, according to the city's income ratio, gives us an 80% reimbursement. But sometimes there are certain aspects that they don't cover as far as what is completely allowable and able to be reimbursed. So our effective gain on this particular project is equalized at 77% over all the different projects. So we're very close to the 80% here.
Whitney, I want to make sure when I report this next week, this is the total cost for all the replacements, all the work.
Yes.
And, the reimbursement is the third column. And,
Yes.
And we are through the design phase, or that's tomorrow's going to get us through?
We are through the schematic design phase. We still will need to do. We've already completed on the boiler project. We've actually completed, and we're actually at the bid with it. If the funding goes forward, we're planning to do that this summer. However, the window design projects for the Kelly, Morgan, Sullivan schools has yet to be done, except for the schematic design.
If I could just add with the intent that that would be a summer 2019 construction.
Right.
And we did not invite our treasurer in, Whitney, but have you worked with the treasurer on this yet in terms of, I think Sandy, my only questions would be, an estimate or a timeline of how she would phase the bond in.
We broke down on the right-hand column what you would see encumberable in this particular fiscal appropriation for the boilers. The current cost that we would actually incur is the $376,304, $376,304 for the Kelly boiler. The other 3 projects we would like to do if the money is appropriated and the city decides to embrace this opportunity, we would like to do that concurrently, all at the same time next summer, in order to get as much work done as possible. But it was unrealistic, as David has mentioned, this summer because of the lead time on the windows. So it wasn't at all possible. So Sandy's and the city's appropriation for this year would be the $376,304. In subsequent years, the actual 2019 to 2020, that would be the remaining 3 amounts there.
Then the life of the bond?
To be determined by the council's discretion.
Any other discussion? Councilor Leahy, sorry.
That's okay. Kind of stole some of my thunder.
I wrote your name down too. I apologize.
Yeah, I think anytime we do any sort of bonding, for a project the size of, close to $14 million, the treasurer should certainly be here to answer any of the questions regarding bonding. my first question is, so tomorrow, the SBA is going to meet, and are they going to discuss the $10.6 million?
They are. They're going to, at that time, we anticipate, because this is an accelerated project, we anticipate that they will, because of all the groundwork that's been done in order to show the need, and it really, this meeting tomorrow is for them to accept that information and then to say, pending funding, you may proceed. And
Right, so-
we will participate.
So it's going to come out of our bonding. So what exactly are we bonding for? 13 million, or are we bonding for 3 million?
You bond for the 13.787, and then you are, you pay those bills, and then you are reimbursed for that amount. And then the effective yield, the effective cost would be the total aggregate of the money that Hoyok is their share,
All right, so back up. So
which would be,
we're bonding for close to $14 million.
Yes.
Then we have to pay it off. Then we get the money back after we pay it off?
yes, but the state has a computerized system they call ProPay that immediately when we make those liquidations, those reimbursements, then we would apply and seek reimbursement, as we've done for the Morgan project with the boilers and also the Ian White project for the boilers. Those are our most recent.
So how often do we put in, all right, so hypothetically this passes, how long, do we pay quarterly, do we pay monthly?
Increments of $50,000. Any bill that aggregates over $50,000, we can go right after the state
Okay,
for
so,
reimbursement.
It can be monthly.
so it's monthly?
Yes.
And so say if it's $50,000, then,
No less than.
so say if we did $50,000 a month, like next month, just hypothetically, the state will give us back 77% of that the following month?
Electronically, yes,
The following, it's guaranteed?
absolutely. And we've just gone through that process with 3 boiler jobs in 2 different schools, and it was very successful. So we actually have learned a lot from those experiences, and now
What's the interest rate on the bond?
good question. We've just hypothetically looked at something for other projects that came in less than 4%.
4%? And, so David, sir, you're with Hill International?
Yes.
Where are you guys out of?
We're out of Boston.
Boston? And Janice, both of you, welcome, by the way, here.
Thank you for having us. I'm with Icon Architecture, downtown Boston.
Worcester?
Boston,
Oh, Boston,
downtown Boston.
downtown Boston, okay. Do your schematics include like any solar for this, to try to reduce the cost of electricity?
When we work with the MSBA, and we've worked with the accelerated repair programs since its inception, they've got really tight boundaries as to what they will reimburse and what they won't. As Whitney explained, you've got your reimbursable, and then you've got your effective reimbursable, because they take every line item and say, yep, nope, that one doesn't count. And so when it comes to PVs and that, even when we're doing a new roof, they won't pay for a PV. They'll pay for the conduit to run to the electrical room, but they won't pay for a PV. So we have
It's a PV?
Photovoltaic.
solar, sorry.
And the reason being is that there are numerous credits available in order to support that activity, and they feel that that's sufficient at this time.
All right, so let me ask you this. So, where are we at with our bond level for our ceiling?
I understand that there is some appreciable opportunity there, but that would leave that for the treasurer to
All right,
specifically.
she's not here, so I'm trying to figure that out. All right, those are the questions I have. Thank you.
We're happy to have followed the process in order to try to come before the subcommittee. I know in many other instances it hasn't worked out that way, and I apologize for that previously.
No, you have the information here. I appreciate what you've done.
Counselor Sullivan?
Thanks. So Whitney, just so I'm clear and so the public has a clear understanding, we bond for $13,797,000.
Mm-hmm.
On those, the actual cost to the city
Yes,
is $3,185,000.
exactly.
And the state is making the bond payments on the $10,661.
The
I mean,
10
$10,661,000.
That is a grant of which they will pay directly
Right.
costs related to that project, yes, which equates to 77%.
Right. Okay. And so the actual amount that will be coming out of our budget will be the 3 million portion of it.
That's correct, right.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor McGee?
For Sullivan School,
Yes.
are we replacing all the doors as well, or that's what I'm trying to figure out in the breakdown here?
We are Sullivan School has a number of courtyards and the like, and there have been various replacements over the years. But as a whole, and trying to keep a cohesive look, at this point in the feasibility, it is pricing all of them.
All doors, so the gymnasium door,
Yes.
which is a travesty.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I guess I'll be the one to ask it. In light of all the things we now see in the press, what about security? Has that been addressed with these doors and windows and everything else?
Security in the sense of, we've got security screens that will be applied to the glazing, so not only from,
Not worried about sunlight, or I'm more
no,
focused
I'm
on-
talking about, heavy metal in a
Okay.
metal frame. There's different levels of security frames. I think we've specified level 4. So some are just, baseballs, some are rocks, some are, vandal resistant or there's various levels of security screen. So they have been spec'd for the windows. And the doors, where there is currently a security system, meaning an access control,
Right.
it will be replaced with an access control system.
So that'll be throughout all the schools. And so Sullivan's getting new windows and doors, Morgan's getting the boiler and new windows and doors?
Kelly.
Kelly, that's what I meant to say,
Mm-hmm.
Kelly.
And Morgan would be the third school.
Okay, and all those new doors are gonna be up to code and the new standard for security purposes for entrance and exit?
Absolutely. And the windows, too, to prevent intrusion.
Right, that's, okay, perfect, that's what. Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Second,
Motion on the floor is to approve the bonding, to recommend the city council to have the city treasurer, after the auditor and the mayor agrees to sign off and to go into the appropriate scheduling of the bonds and the appropriate reimbursement, more important, as they come along. One last question, because you talked about broken windows, plexiglass, and things of that nature. What we're, part of this design, what is what is taken into consideration to protect broken windows and future problems down the road?
This screening that Janice was referring to and I was talking about earlier, we have children, we like to open the windows. And the windows themselves, because of the fact that some of them are multi-story, they can only be opened so far. So there's a limited opportunity there to get ventilation in, but we'll take whatever we can get. Now, the windows, a majority of the windows that we have throughout the district now do not have screens on them. So anyone with any sensitivities for insect stings, things like that, it creates a risk and a hazard. These windows will have a screen over the covering, which would still allow us to open the window and would be vandal resistant because it's a higher quality than what you and I would naturally assume for an insect screen. But it also will serve as a resistance there in that regard. So we've learned a lot of lessons at the high school in regards to a successful implementation of windows that happened there from 2009, 2010, and a phased rollout of that building. And those windows, Janice had mentioned a product called CalWall. CalWall is a translucent fiberglass covering that comes on the inside and the outside. Actually has a bit of insulation on the interior, so it can go over a large expanse of an area such as the gymnasium or the cafeteria down at Morgan. We can bring in a sight line of glass in order to still have that feeling that you can see out, as well as allowing light it's transparent. So that in itself, those are the types of criteria that we're looking at and building into these projects as well. We're also trying to do this homogeneously, so we'll get similar windows in the 3 similar schools, and to bid it at the same time, utilizing, and this is, again, next summer, and probably 6 months prior to that, in order to try to have an equivalent specification at each of these schools. So, long story short, we learned some good lessons at the high school, and those have held up really well. So this is what we hope to imitate
No
here.
guarantees, but we feel a lot better about, Janice, can you spell that product for me? Yeah,
Calwall, Kalwall. Again, that's a proprietary product, and so we're saying Calwall-like. I mean, I'm not specifying something that specific, but that, like Kleenex, has a knowledge of what it is.
That's right. It's a very common product that many districts are using these days, and it's affordable as well as durable, and it holds up a long time.
Counselor Dahlman?
Yeah, quick question. Thanks for coming down and explaining this to us. Some of these schools are 40 years old or older, and some of the renovations haven't been done for probably 30 years. So these windows and the doors, they have some type of lifespan, or there's some kind of warranty on these. Could you give us any indication on that?
You know, offhand, I don't know the warranty, but
It's
I
an
will look
important
it
thing
up.
to know, I mean, for this, type of
exactly.
project, Could you get that to?
Traditionally, the workmanship, as usual for the labor to install the products, has a 1-year warranty. But the glazing materials traditionally would have a longer duration of time, anywhere from 3 to 5 years for fogging or any type of a break in that thermal barrier.
And the finish would have
And the finishes of
5 to
the
10
metal.
year.
Yeah, they usually have like 10-year.
So the real key here is with this Calwall product, which is actually, it's a fiberglass product that is opaque. That is extremely durable. So just its inherent design gives us the good effectiveness. We have some of this material in place at the Kelly School and at the Donahue School and at the high school. And while it's not very pretty at the Kelly School or at the Donahue School in the gymnasium, it's still held up 30 or 40 years. So we anticipate some really good longevity out of this.
Well, as well, the product has advanced significantly, so it isn't like the product that's currently installed. It is.
Right.
It's very.
Ultraviolet stable, yeah.
Well, aesthetically pleasing, and integrating that with some clear glass so that you've got that connection to the exterior, as well as the ability to open up some lights, so it's not just, all fixed light. Will give some variety and interest in the elevations.
I just think it's important for a project of this scope and this cost. It's important to know that, how long these, are going to
Absolutely.
last and how they fit in with, like you said, the light and the durability of this product, because, sometimes people, something made 30 years ago, it lasts 30 years. Sometimes things change. I know the products change, but sometimes things made today, not the same as a washer or dryer you made 30 years ago that's still working.
I totally agree with you there, with the exception of the current energy code requires a lot more performance out of these windows. So with the energy glazing, the insulated glass with the argon and the low E, it'll be a much more thermally performing window than some of the, Morgan has some steel windows and some single pane, and the Lexan, they will outperform.
Okay, thank you.
Pete, I apologize in regards to taking for granted some of the details here, but around the doors themselves, we found that a traditional hinge doesn't hold up too well sometimes. Sometimes the people will put a wooden wedge in the door and then it'll get closed, unfortunately, and then the thing gets sprung and it's shot. What we use now are upgrades of a continuous hinge that goes along the entire length of the frame to bond that door to the frame and try to alleviate some of these things that we've found in the past end up to be problem areas. The types of hardware that we use, connecting mullions to bring two doors together simply instead of having vertical rods and that type of connecting hardware that ends up to fail relatively quickly. So we've learned a lot of lessons over the course of time that Janice is building into the specifications. Yeah.
Sorry, we should not be discussing this aloud. When you remind me, it's the treasurer request, and I'm gonna take the hit for the treasurer not being here. I should have paid a little more. This scope of project and this size of project, we usually invite the treasurer in, and we usually turn our mics on before we talk. My recollection is, I understand the way the treasurer works with bonds. I understand, there'll be some short-term borrowing. I understand we gotta appropriate the whole amount. Once the interest starts kicking in, does the state reimburse the interest in that 77% or just 70% of the project?
Well, because of the project itself takes a duration of time, there is an escalation factor. Because we're not starting everything right now, we have to anticipate the costs coming up for next fiscal year, so to speak, or the next construction period, actually, is what it is. And so there are costs that are built into this initial 13.8 that cover those expenses. As far as the reimbursement of borrowing and the like, I think they pretty much leave the cities on their own for their portion of of their expense in order to handle that as they see fit. So I do not,
I think,
They don't cover interest.
I don't think they cover our,
not the interest on our part, the interest on, if we bond for the full amount,
yes.
and we don't get the reimbursement quickly enough, we're gonna have interest on the full amount, is what I think the question asking, right?
You
Yeah, I'm-
shouldn't have interest on anything more than the 3.185 million, because the MSBA will reimburse us really within a couple of weeks of money actually being spent during
The
construction.
system is electronically, so it is very quick compared to
Yeah.
the old days,
Once it's in the system, they're paying as you're paying.
because everything is pre-approved. So really, all we're doing is putting forth a reconciliation that the bill's been covered temporarily, and then we are all over that reimbursement.
You good?
Joe, pardon me,
Whitney?
Chairman, we do the reimbursements in-house. We have now, and we've learned a lot over the course of the 3 projects I've been involved with, that we now have a financial analyst through Mr. Soto's department that is assigned to this particular task and works directly with the treasurer in order to see that the bills are paid quickly. And also, she actually inputs all the data into the software for the state, and I work hand in hand with her to approve any and all invoices that come from the generation of the product. So it's a closed-knit group that will handle the money very appropriately.
Thank you. Counselor Sullivan?
I think any other questions, I can wait for the treasurer. They're more around that bond, the same questions about the bond and the interest and the.
Okay. Any other discussion? Motion on the floor is to adopt and approve and recommend to the city council at our next regularly scheduled meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That would be unanimous. Thank you, Janice, David, Whitney, always. We appreciate it.
Thank you for your considerations.
Thank you for coming in tonight.
Speaking of that, Mr. Soto, Anthony, we have item number 11. Motion to take off the table for purpose of discussion. This is a school charter assessment request, a transfer of $1,235,126 to school expenses, $900,000, with the additional going to unemployment, $335,126. Anthony, thank you. If you could walk the committee through this.
Sure. So what happens at the beginning of the year or at the end of June when we develop our FY18 budget, the state passes what they call a cherry sheet, which represents, what we're supposed to get in receipts as a municipality and some of the assessments that we have to carry. And as part of those assessments, they estimate what the city has to appropriate for money that we're going to owe charter schools for students that live in Holyoke but are attending other charter schools. In the middle of December and early January, what they do is they true up those numbers. So when we developed the budget, in short, our charter assessment number was too high. And the way that the school department's appropriation works is we start at net school spending, and as part of the process, we pull aside money for health insurance, we pull aside money for this charter assessment, and we pull aside other items and then say, okay, here, school department, here's the rest of the money. And in overestimating those expenses, in essence, what was done is we don't have the ability to meet our net school spending requirement if we don't have access to that funding. So What we're looking for is for the opportunity to take that overestimate and true it up. This is a process that realistically should happen every year. If you guys remember last year, we also came when we had a budget shortfall for unemployment and transportation. The state had also last year overestimated what we needed for charter assessment. So this is simply moving money from a charter, in my opinion, it's moving money from a school department line item to another school department line item in order to meet the net school spending requirement for FY18.
Thank you. Other discussion, Counselor Leahy?
Yeah, thank you. So, thank you for coming in, and thank you for the work you do. I think you've been doing a fantastic job. I was telling that to Dr. Zarek the other day on the phone. I hope he shared that with you.
You did. Thank you very much for your kind words.
And I'll be all over him. Just kidding. So how much is our net school spending for FY18?
It's roughly $81 million.
And how much of that so we're short, 900,000?
We are short 1.2 million because initially what was appropriated for charter assessments was too high, and as part of our net school spending calculation, the state updates it with actuals in January.
How much of the 81 million comes from the state?
71.
71. So the city of Holyoke approximately pays about taxpayers' money comes about $10 million?
Correct.
10 million, wow, okay.
It's like 10.3, so I'm using round
Yeah,
numbers.
yeah, ballpark. So you're in the audience, so when we're talking about that bonding before Whitney and those other, those two other people, does that get included to net school spending?
No, those items aren't eligible to be included in that 81 million. So the state has strict guidelines as to what can be included. They say, hey, we're gonna give you 71 million, but you gotta spend 81 million on education, and bond payments and incurring debt can't be part of that number. It has to be instructional in nature, and for regular what they call non-extraordinary maintenance. So that's how we're able to upkeep our buildings and do minor projects. But anything over $150,000, they consider about more than just extraordinary maintenance. And
Okay, so so out of the $81 million, I guess it'd be more than 81. How much do we pay for the charter schools now?
the charter school assessment was in the FY18 appropriation. It was over $11 million. And when they actually trued it up, it came in at around 9.9. So
about 10
that's
million.
what we're gonna spend.
So is that included in 81, or is that?
It is included in the 81.
So we do get credit for net school spending with?
Yes.
Okay, so we do, but however, we have $10 million there. How many charter schools do we have in Holyoke now? 3?
Yeah, we have Paulo Ferreira and Sabas, but any student who lives in, any resident who lives in Holyoke could be attending a charter school in another district. Those are considered, we are fiscally responsible for those students as well.
To how many schools are we paying?
I don't have the number off the top of my head, but I would say at least 10.
10. So this is just interesting to me because, you know, we're all elected officials and the school committee's elected. And so we're paying $10 million to about 10 different schools. But we have, and it's taxpayer money, but yet we have zero oversight on any of that. That just intrigues me.
Nor does the school committee or
Yeah,
the receiver,
Just, it's a weird system. So are we also getting an additional charter school? I was reading somewhere, or maybe the charter school that was up near the mall is expanding, or?
They put in a request, but I don't think that was approved yet.
Okay. Now, have we fought that? Because in their charter, or in the charter of the charter school, isn't it supposed to be in downtown?
I'm sorry, I don't understand. Sorry.
I thought the charter was supposed to be, the Apollo one was supposed to be built in the downtown area. Is that not right?
Yeah, I'm not sure what Paulo Ferreira's charter is, but I do know that they're not accepting any new any new additional seats, which they were requested, as well as Holyoke Charter School. They applied to expand their charter, and the state, as of yet, hasn't approved it.
My last question, so out of the 10 million, the 9.9, we were always told that the state will give us back a percentage of that. How much do we get back in reimbursement for that?
So this year, we're gonna be getting $735,000.
Wasn't it supposed to be like 90% or 75%?
It should be, I mean, this year it should be about 1.8 million or 1.7 million, and we're only getting 735,000.
Now, can we sue the state, or, is there any legal, how do we get, it just boggles my mind that they make an agreement, but yet they don't stick to the agreement.
Yeah, I mean, I've been advocating for that for the past at least 6 years in this community and the previous community.
It's not only our community, it's other communities as well.
Mostly the gateway city. You think about where the charter schools are, they're not really in rural areas. They're
Right.
normally in urban districts. So any time that state most oftentimes has good news around education, and they go out and they say we're not making cuts to education, and that's strictly what they're saying when they say that is Chapter 70 money, which is the majority of it, but over here, they make cuts to things that they don't really talk about. And in most cases, that impacts districts like Holyoke. We just had a recent cut to our circuit breaker reimbursement. Communities that have high concentration of special needs gets hurt when they make cuts like that.
So out of the 351 cities and towns throughout Massachusetts, Holyoke is, I think, by far taking on more on our shoulders than I believe than any other community in the Commonwealth. And yet, we're supposed to be getting $1.2 million back, and yet we're only going to get close to 700,000. That's just not right. But
Yeah.
It's not your fault. It's down in Boston, I suppose.
Yeah.
So, do you have meetings with the state senator and Rep. Vega?
I've met with Rep. Vega. I've met with Don Humison for the past, since I've been here, at least once a year, and I've pushed this issue. And I will say that Aaron Vega has been publicly supportive on this issue. But it's not an issue that only Holyoke is facing. We're really pushing hard, and I'm hoping that the state, oftentimes we could be viewed as anti-charter, and we're not. Anything that is a good option for kids, we're completely on board with, but we just want the state to take a look at the funding and fund it appropriately so that it alleviates the impact on, some of the students that we're losing. You lose 1 or 2 or 10 kids, you still have 1 principal per building. Right. You don't lose any square footage. You still need to maintain the same number of custodians. So that reimbursement is always helpful when you're losing small waves of students to other districts and to charter schools.
Thank you.
The reimbursement isn't just helpful, it's necessary, and the state has never lived up to it. Our state rep they are looking into it, and I think Council Leahy's questions are very important, and I think the legislature is trying to address it this year because I believe it's Brockton, Lawrence, and Fall River are that close to the lawsuit. And I think Holyoke will follow them if that lawsuit does come out. And it's sad that we have to sue the state for monies that should be ours for an unfair formula from the get-go. We were told the charter school battle was lost in the eastern part of the state before any charter school was proposed out here. And I disagree, and I think the voters, saw through the lines at the last election when they passed the ballot question and said, enough is enough. And if the legislature and the governor don't get it, I understand school choice, and I think school choice is great because students are making a decision. Things, unfortunately, maybe for the wrong reasons, but they're doing it, and they're still going to a school, and there is someone watching those dollars in the particular school. Charter schools, 3 out of 4 of them are for profit, and the ones that are not for profit are making money off of the tax dollars that come their way. And that, I mean, is, some schools, like I won't mention the big one in Springfield, that produce their own books, and then the state has to buy the books from them. even though they're a not-for-profit school. And the joke is, you can't choose to go to a charter school. You enter a lottery. That's, how do tax dollars get spent that way? On the roll of a dice, if a student can go to a charter school. It's not because they want to be there, it's because they have to request to go there, and they have to win a lottery. And I'd love to see the charter schools take on our special need children and what we do for them, which is a tremendous cost, but a noble service that the city of Holyoke, and I think most communities, especially gateway communities, are burdened with the incredible cost of special needs. Anyways, you got me going, Anthony. So the question I want to hear next Tuesday, and I know it wasn't asked this evening, so when you and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, is the state didn't reimburse what they're supposed to reimburse, but we didn't use what they did give us in this year because of a difference in numbers. Mm-hmm. And that's why we're looking to transfer some of this money back to the schools. Mm-hmm. Is that the correct way of doing it?
Yes, so initially we, as part of our appropriation, we took too much away from the schools to pay for this charter assessment, and if we don't move it back, it'll just sit there and we won't meet our net school spending requirement by like $1.2 million.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
And typically, the charter school, I call it a pass-through, but the charter school line item, if you want to call it, is always come as net school spending, but has come through the city side, where the schools had very little to say over it, but understand that it's there, and a lot to say over, this is who we lost, and this is what the numbers should be, because I think at one time we were dependent upon the charter schools telling us what the numbers were, and I'm not too sure that's the best way to do business either, but that one's on the state. And, there's one thing about the unemployment, is this gonna get us through the end of the year? And I know you put more money in your budget for unemployment, and this is almost like a double dip by the city for this 300,000?
Yes. We appropriated $700,000, and I think we're gonna be on target to hit that.
Councilor McGee?
That's what I was gonna ask, why is the money going into these two accounts, 900 and then 335?
That was the recommendation of the finance team. And I worked with Rory and the mayor, and they wanted to move some money into unemployment and then give the school department the rest.
So were you short in unemployment?
So when we developed our appropriation, we took $700,000 away from net school spending for unemployment, and what was appropriated in the budget and voted on was only $400,000, and I didn't realize that until I was approached because again, these aren't on our books, so I don't have access to monitor what's going through them. But I was approached by the personnel department to say, hey, Anthony, you're running out of unemployment money, and I had been doing projections, and I said, no, we're not, we shouldn't be running out of money, we're gonna be right on target. And when she showed me what was in the budget, I was surprised to see that there was 400 there. And then just in talking to Rory, I'm not sure if there was a cut made during the budget, yeah. So I wasn't aware of that at the time, but what we had appropriated initially was 700, and I think we're on target to spend that much.
And is that the average every year, 700, or?
Last year was a lot higher. We spent around $900,000 last year. The year before, it was like 450. The year before that, it was like 800. It varies depending on what's going on. I think receivership had a lot to do with that initially. There were a lot of staff that were on receivers review and not making enough progress. But we did definitely work hard to eliminate the waste that had been going on, where, now we're sending out reasonable assurance letters to those staff that would, lose their job at the end of the year, but then come work for us in September, so they were never really unemployed because they don't work during the summer. We've been working with our UTCA who does our unemployment work. We've been working with them really closely to make sure that every unemployment claim is legitimate and that we're doing everything that we can to control and minimize and stabilize these costs.
Mr. Tallman?
Thanks, Anthony. Thanks for coming down and explaining this again to us. And I remember last year we talked about this. I almost were in the same scenario, but it was with busing, I think, and something else, I think it was, that the money was transferred to.
Yes.
And didn't we talk about something about you being on board with the auditor or checking with him through January to the other day? Are you still meeting with somebody in the financial so we can keep an eye on these transactions as monthly, on a monthly basis, or are you in touch with them?
With Bellamy, I was not so much with Josh at the time. Bellamy's, since he's gotten here, we've been working really close together. Yeah.
Because I think that's important too. I think we brought that last year, that trying to keep in touch with, letting them know when this extra money was there. Because you said they fluctuate, right? The assessment, we don't know until January.
Correct.
When the students that we get.
So we found out January 17th is when the state did their process. We found out probably in early February. And at the time when I brought it up, that's when a lot of the city was having, I don't know what the right words are, but that's when all the financial issues were being discussed. So what I was told was we got to take care of that, and then that will be coming we'll be coming to the council and correcting this at the appropriate time once the books are balanced.
Right. And now let's just say you weren't over on the assessment and the state says, oh, well, you're not getting 1.2, you're only getting 600,000. So in other words, we could be in the hole 600,000 more if you didn't get that.
It rarely happens. They usually make you budget the worst case scenario. I mean, I even almost want to have a discussion with the finance team to, hey, if they're saying the budget 14 million, can we do like 13.5 because we know they're going to be short and not have to go through this. But because we are having, on our end, we're looking at initially a $5 million deficit, but we've got it down to like $3.5 million right now. And any little bit counts. We're really trying hard to stay away from making cuts that impact kids in schools. So, if we could, take a look at some trends and see that we were overestimating and help balance, the budget a little bit with making an educated guess on what that number is going to be as opposed to what they're telling us it should be, it would go a long way. So I don't know of a time where it was in the other direction. It's usually they overestimate, and then they think there's going to be this many charter school seats. And then when they actually true up in December, not as many kids had gone to charter schools as they initially anticipated.
Okay, and then can students come from other districts to come to our charter schools, and that's part of this, or no? It's like South Hadley or Granby or East Hampton could come to a charter school in Holyoke, or is that on their?
If they live in Granby, then it would be in Granby's budget to pay for the charter school.
For the charter school, okay. So
if you have kids that are living in Granby and going to Holyoke charter school, Granby would have an assessment in their budget, and they'd be paying it. They'd be passing that money through for each student that's in the Holyoke charter school seat. Okay. So we're only paying for kids that live in Holyoke, yes.
And we had the gentleman here last year from the Department of Education, right? It's talked about the net school spending and how, 1 or 2 years maybe we missed it?
Yes, I had put together a trend. I don't have it with me today, but the city's been really good about meeting net school spending. I think In 2012, we missed it, and then last year, we had, the year before last year, we had missed it, FY '17.
And
We
like
had
you
missed
stated,
it.
there's only certain things you can use it towards in that school spending. And what are those, some of those items?
So it's probably easier to say what it can't be used for, so it has to be used for the regular operating
Operation.
costs of the school department, but it can't be used for transportation, adult education, any leases greater than 3 years old. So they would allow you to lease a building for 3 years and use some of that Chapter 70 money to pay for it, but after the third year, that would become the responsibility of the city. And then any extraordinary maintenance above 150,000, which is like the accelerated repair projects that you guys just voted on.
Okay, just to give us a better understanding. So, I mean, we're going to make it this year then, the net school spending.
If this transfer is made, yes, we will make it. The state does allow you to encumber the money to meet that requirement. So Todd had brought something up earlier about around safety and security. Right now, we didn't appropriate funding to make some necessary safety improvements that we want to make. We want to get a card access reader for every single door and eliminate the big ring of keys that we have for each of our buildings. We also want to get some cameras that are recording regularly. And they have this product, A-Phone, where we can actually see. So somebody comes to the door, they ring a buzzer. Right now we have a camera. Sometimes it's looking at the side view of them or the back, depending on the angle. We want to get a front shot,
And
right?
face.
See them and be able to communicate with them. One of the investments we want to make with this money would be to get that at every single one of our schools.
And what would the time frame be for that about?
We would have to go through the regular procurement process and bid a project like that, unless there's vendors on state contract. We are looking at two different products, and there's currently 3 vendors right now providing, they're walking through our buildings and taking a look at the specs, because there's the biggest cost there is not going to be the cameras and the hardware itself. It's going to be the cabling and the wiring. So they need, in order to do that, they need to walk through our buildings. So we've had a couple of vendors already walk through, and then we have another vendor walking through, and they're going to be providing us with quotes. And then hopefully we'll have the funding to do that.
And this would be probably in more than likely all the schools?
It would definitely be in all
Not
the
just the
schools.
high schools, yeah.
Absolutely.
I can say safety is in every school is important, especially what's been going on in the last couple of months, throughout the country, especially in this area. I think is important to have that.
Absolutely.
That looked at. Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I just asked Ryan, our administrative assistant, we also received two communications at our last meeting. They're in the copies or the actual communications for archive purposes are with us. One is from Dr. Zarek, which Anthony just gave the explanation of why the $1.3 million is necessary to balance the next school spending and to help balance the school budget. We also have a communication from the Mass Department of Elementary Second Education, which states that fiscal year 17, not only did we meet next school spending, but we were above and beyond by about $900,000, it looks like. And in fiscal 18, it outlines that the exact number that's before us this evening that we're looking to rectify for the purpose of net school spending. And that's just, for the committee and for anybody that didn't get copies to understand. Any other discussion? Councilor Sullivan and Councilor Bacon.
So just quickly, you mentioned when you're going through the things that do and don't affect net school spending. There was one item you mentioned over 150 or under 150,000. I think it was on capital expenses.
So any capital expenses, so they allow you to do any extraordinary maintenance as long as it's under 150,000.
Under 150.
Yes.
So,
Any major renovation to a school,
Yeah.
if it's under $150,000, it could potentially be considered extraordinary maintenance or ordinary maintenance. Anything over that, they consider a capital project, and that's their threshold for deciding whether or not that's something that's eligible for net school spending or not.
Okay, so we've got this issue with $13 million in bonding, right?
Yeah,
We
they won't,
discussed
they won't
earlier.
allow you to bid split it or split it up. They won't say, hey, you can put $150,000 towards it. They look at it as one project, and the project is $13 million.
Okay, I think that answers that, because just roughly calculating, it would affect, our payment we'd only be making payments actually on 3 million.
Three, yep.
Over 20 years, that's only 150,000, roughly, excluding the interest, $150,000 a year. But we wouldn't be able to,
Yeah, no, they look at the project and the total cost. And they also don't allow the school department to incur any debt with net school spending money, with Chapter 70 funds.
all right.
Counselor Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My questions are related to the city side of the budget and how it will relate to the school. I know that last year was the first year we did not take the money into the city side of the budget from the charter school numbers. And I'll stand to be corrected if my timeline is wrong, but from the way I'm seeing the information that came through to us, I don't believe the Department of Revenue was aware of our shortfall in net school spending when they certified our free cash. So I'm wondering what effect on the city side budget we're going to have if we do this now. And if I can just clarify, did we or did we not meet net school spending in 2017? I'm hearing no, and I'm hearing yes. So we
Well,
did?
I wasn't trying to contradict what Anthony had
just
said, but I was just reading the
confused.
letter and realized it was a little different than what he said. But I think, and I'm gonna let Anthony speak for himself, net school spending, like a lot of items that we deal with, especially when you deal with the state, is a moving target. And unlike these items we took earlier this evening, where we have to keep everything within one fiscal year, it kind of blends together as you go from one fiscal year to the other fiscal year. And then if we encumber funds correctly, and once we spend them, then it balances off the net school spending figure itself. According to this letter, we went above and beyond our requirement for fiscal 17, but Anthony, I'll let you give the other version.
Yes, we did meet our net school spending requirement. In fact, we spent a little above. It wasn't that amount. I did reach out to the state. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but the full number would pretty much represent. So every year, the city gives us above net school spending. They give us $100,000, and that's to go towards the Lower Pioneer Valley collaborative, that they do our Medicaid reimbursement process. So the city benefits from that. I think they get 1.2 million, 1.4 million. It depends on, what the claiming is. So the city of Holyoke, what they do is they give us our net school spending, but in addition to that, they give us $100,000. And if you remember correctly, we went over on unemployment, and we had to, there was some money that was moved from another line item in the city's budget to cover that unemployment. In doing so, we spent over net school spending. So for those two items, roughly, is what our,
Resulted
that
in-
resulted in overage in net school spending. What I don't know that we could change that here or change that in 1 year, but really what I think would make this a lot cleaner down the road, once we get an auditor full-time and we're working together and there's an understanding of how school finance works, those items can be on our books instead of being separate. Anything that's part of net school spending, I would advocate to just put it on our books. That way I can analyze the bills going through it and make sure that we meet the requirement, and not only meet the requirement, but not in any year, not go over. If I'm trending that unemployment is gonna go over, I would be able to move money from within our budget to cover the difference. And if it's short, then I wouldn't have to come to the council and say, hey, we're at risk at not meeting net school spending, and I'd like to get a transfer or anything like that. So where we can do that, I'd like to do it, but I know that that's a bigger conversation, and it's going to take a lot of work, and once I think we have an auditor that's here for good, and he's comfortable with making a recommendation like that, I think that that's something that we should consider.
Thank you. So what I'm concerned about is the impact on the cash on the city side if we make this transfer, since historically we took the cash into the city. And I'm just a little confused around the cash certification where this was not in the mix when we submitted to the Department of Revenue. So I would like to understand what that impact will be. And right now, I mean, I'm not necessarily saying somebody in the room right now should tell me the answer because I don't know if it's known.
I can.
But that's my question.
We went through this last year, and it's a good question, because last year we stumbled through this because we've never addressed this before.
Right.
With the charter school reimbursement, even though in all monies come under the auditor at some point. Schools is still part of the city budget. We just refer to them different because their budget stands alone, mostly because when the school committee is in full power, they have their line item control and so forth. But if you look, you will find the charter school numbers on the cherry sheet. You won't find them in the actual budget as a line item.
Right, and I remember that generally, but it was the specifics of
Yeah.
it that I've.
And that's why there's not a direct, I want to say this the right way, Anthony, but you accountants and financial people always say it better. There's not a direct impact on free cash, going to the other part of your question. Charter school surpluses could, be something that could be used in many different ways, but eventually the state's going to catch up to all of it. And that's why I asked the question earlier, because they've never given us our full amount.
Right.
There's not much they can catch up to, but in a given year, I think we have to be careful. The school department has identified, this year, that school spending's off. They have, I don't know if you shared or gave us a number tonight about your balancing, your deficiencies this year.
Yeah, for the upcoming year, we initially, when the governor released his budget, we were looking at a $5 million budget deficit, and we've met with department heads and updated a lot of the assumptions, and we're getting closer, but we're still not there. We're looking at a $3.5 million deficit that we still got to continue to solve. There's some things that would help, like I know we're getting money for some of our some Puerto Rico relief money for the hurricane, and that money can be spent in future years when we do get it. We do want to minimize the impact of those cuts on the classroom, so there will be some one-time revenue streams that we're going to be using to soften the blow a little bit.
And last year, and I don't think I was the only counselor, but I don't think we as city council would know a lot of this if it wasn't for the gentleman sitting in front of us. And I thanked them last year, and I thank you again this year for not only bringing this to our attention, but bringing it to our attention where we can at least start to understand it, Linda, right? Because and the other part of it too, and I wasn't going to say this, but the the Brian Smith, who we I think we didn't take for granted. We appreciated Brian incredibly. Did a lot of this on his shoulders and could explain it to you in layman's terms or our terms in a minute. But, Brian worked close with the school department, and what we need is to get our next permanent auditor, someone who's gonna be in the same position with the schools, so we can connect, with these and make sure we're appropriately, during the year, adjusting these numbers and knowing them, even more important.
Thank you.
Okay? Any other questions or discussion? Chair, entertain a motion.
Make a motion to pass the transfer.
Motion made second, that we recommend that the transfer pass at the next city council meeting. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? So moved. Unanimous. Anthony, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Have a good night.
We have a number of people here who had an earlier meeting, and we thank you for joining us. Item number 12 is in the form of a communication from the Holyoke Water Department that we actually received back in February. I've been talking with the superintendent of the Water Department, Mr. Conti, for some time now, and I promised him we'd get this in for April. This communication was, I think, misdirected at one point where I think some people thought it was in another committee, but the city clerk looked at the records and said, nope, this is in the finance committee as it should be. So with this, our commissioners, David, and if you please come in, wherever you feel comfortable. If the light doesn't have a green light, when you go to talk, you got to push the button to talk. And we're looking for, it's a 2.5-page letter. I would ask that we would just have our superintendent walk us through it, and then maybe we could, get into a point of questions and discussion on this. Commissioner Harblisk, Commissioner Nadorf, and who else do we have with us?
Well,
Ed
first,
Sullivan.
if I can, I want to thank you first for having us here. From the Water Commissioner, David Conti, the manager, Bill Harbliss, a commissioner, myself, and Joe Manzi is the business manager. We've also brought with us the former mayor of West Springfield, Ed Sullivan, who has got some great news for the city. We may start with him, I think, and give you the good news first.
Always start with mayors, trust me.
Yes. And so we've got a whole program of that deals with the environment, and I'm going to just leave it to Ed. He is much better at explaining it than I. So thank you for having us. Ed, why don't you...
Dave, you want to pass those out?
First copy is the final draft of the intermunicipal agreement between tri-communities, Holyoke, and Westfield.
Here, we got one more copy. Thanks.
Second copy is correspondence that I sent to the city council. It also includes a breakdown of the revenues that are projected to be generated between the three communities under the department program. And there's a sheet that just shows the distribution of the properties that are going to be included under the program. Holyoke, the largest of the landowners, representing almost 50%.
Got two of those. Thanks.
This project has been spearheaded by former Mayor Ed Sullivan, and he is the expert on the project, and I'm sure this is more than anybody here. So we've asked him to be here tonight to talk a little bit about it. Seek your approval.
Thanks, Dave. Well, it's a pleasure to be here and meet everyone this evening. It's not often I get to come to Holyoke and speak in front of the councilors, so it's a treat. What this program is, it was initiated back in 2015, and knowing that each community does harvesting of your timber, cordwood, and the like, what this program is, it's a little different. It's I like to call it passive income, and what you do is you actually get paid for your carbon footprint. So that's the number of trees and the carbon that it generates. Do you guys need more copies? Here's the agreement. Here's the land. Here's So this is a different type of market that pays communities for their urban forest. Now, when I initiated this back 3 years ago, I thought it'd be a great intermunicipal way for us to work together, West Springfield, Holyoke, and then at the last minute with Mayor Knappich in Westfield before he left, to have a 3-community intermunicipal agreement, the first of its kind, quite frankly. I believe it's probably in the nation. for communities to work together and combine our forest footprint, in this case, our watersheds, to generate additional revenue just by maintaining our trees. And quite frankly, it's kind of a no-brainer because our watersheds, we don't really tap into our trees other than some harvesting. So when we put this agreement together, and after talking to the commissioners in Holyoke, it was understood that you like to harvest in Holyoke. So when this plan was put together, we included an aspect where the communities could continue to harvest and they would cut into their growth. Usually it's about 20% growth each year. So the communities, when they went in and they figured out our forest density and checked the trees and so on and so forth to figure out what our carbon footprint would be. Now, and then you're paid per carbon credit. Now, a carbon credit it's a financial unit of measurement that represents the amount of carbon removed from the air. So 1 carbon credit equals 1 ton of carbon removed from the air. So that's how they come up with the numbers. The fortunate thing is we're abutters. The other fortunate thing is we all have the same forester, who happens to be Mary Wigmore. So she's worked closely with 3 communities over the year, and she knows us all very well, and we're all very comfortable with her. So Mary worked with us in the 3 communities to put together the land management package, and also work with us to help this, what we call carbon sequestration. So I don't want to jump the gun, and feel free to jump in any time. It's if you go to the sheet where it talks about the carbon yield, what they did is they totaled up the carbon by going to a number of different sites and measuring the trees and checking the carbon within the trees. And they came up with 41,000, almost 300 credit yield. Now, broken down by the community, if you go over to the third, we're in Holyoke, so it's the third to the last column, you'll see what the annual yield will be. And it's based on a price of $8.50. We worked with a group when West Springfield put out an RFP, this group, Blue Source, bid on the job, and they are familiar in this industry. And it is an industry, and I don't know how many of you are from the old paper industry, but what they used to do when they took printing presses and the like offline, they would let the companies pool their VOCs. So if another company wanted to add a press or something like that, they would have to go into this VOC pool to buy VOC credits to put a printing press online. In Holyoke, it might have been Hamden or Hazen that would need to have a larger VOC capacity. So very similar is this program to that pooling, where if someone like Disney wants to clear cut forest to expand their amusement parks, or someone in California wants to cut down trees and they take down 40 acres, they have to pay to maintain 40 acres somewhere else in the country. It could be Massachusetts, it could be Ohio, it could be Maine. So that's why this program is pretty popular, because of the environmental significance that comes along with saving our forested areas. So that's where the price comes. Companies start paying a price, they go out to bid, they solicit customers in the voluntary market, and a conservative price of $8.50 is paid for a credit union or a credit ton. And this works out to the dollars you see. The last conversation I had with the people from Blue Source, they were selling these carbon credits for $11 a ton. Of course, everything fluctuates, just like the stock market. So if that was the case in Holyoke, I did some quick math while I was listening to your net school spending, which I'm familiar with. That would bring Holyoke's annual yield up to 139, almost 140,000 a year. So it depends on what the carbon unit sold for is what the yield is. Now, again, each community continue to do their harvesting and generate dollars that way. This will be additional monies that come into the community just by maintaining your forest area. So then the question is going to be, well, what happens if, God forbid, there's a fire or something along those lines, or contamination? Well, there's insurance included in this proposal that protects each community from a catastrophe. So the community wouldn't be liable for any loss of trees in that case. So those dollars have already been thought out and included in the pricing and the feedback to the communities. So I'm kind of rambling along here, but anybody have any questions to this point?
Mayor, you can ramble anytime you want in Holyoke. We welcome you. Thank you for a very concise but a very good explanation. Because when David explained it to me, I had no idea what he was talking about. Councilor Leahy.
Yeah, hey, thank you, Mayor. I think it's ironic, the first time I met you was actually at the Big E on Holyoke Day.
That's right.
So, good to have you here in the city, Mayor. So this company, what's it, Blue something?
Blue Source.
Blue Source. So where do they get the money to provide credits?
Well, what they do is they sell the credits. So what they do is they work off a commission. Their commission is already deducted from the dollars you'll see here. So it's actually a good thing, because if they don't sell these credits at a higher dollar amount, then they're making less money. So that's where they generate their money. I do want to say that when we started this project, I had submitted for a grant to the state to get us up and running of $100,000, and the governor and our legislators, it ended up going through. So the initial setup of this program is from a $100,000 grant that I had submitted to the state. So nobody's out any dollars. This hasn't cost Holyoke or Westfield or West Springfield anything other than the time and energy that have gone into it, and Dave and some other folks.
So if we agree to this, are we putting any limit to Mr. Conti and his workers? Is there anything they can't do if we agree to this at the water department?
No, the only thing you can't do, and it's already in place, let me give you an example, like Westfield has conservation restrictions. I'm not familiar with Holyoke, and there might be some. You cannot impede on any conservation restrictions. Whatever those are, they would be maintained as are. And Blue Source understands that because they've dealt with this before. But there's no impediments or impediments to...
And you guys have all discussed this probably at length. You guys are all in favor of this?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, those are the questions I have.
Councilor Sullivan?
Thanks. So how do we verify the numbers from Blue Source?
So what they do is they go in and they actually take the, well, you mean as what they sell it for?
Correct, that we're getting reimbursed the proper amount.
Right, there's a addendum that was added to the intermunicipal agreement where they have to verify what the sale price of the carbon credits are. And each community would receive those dollars directly. So we would know, and I guess it's pretty easy to verify what they're sold for on the market. We can check that. And what happens every 5 years, they'll come in and what they're going to do is verify that, say, for example, West Springfield hasn't cut down, 500 acres of trees. So every 5 years, there's a reevaluation on their part to confirm what these companies, whether it's Disney or Boeing or whatever, whoever's going to buy these, is actually preserving what they're paying for. So there's a verification on both sides.
Okay, so is there an outside auditor that checks? I'm not concerned about that we've
Right,
cut
there is.
something down that the.
Our forester's the one that handles all of that for all three cities, so she's really the one that verifies. She's the one that verifies all of the growth and the cuts and.
I understand the growth and the cuts. It's the actual sale of the credits. Who's verifying how much they were sold for?
Well, we can check on that. We would have our financial person, West Springfield CFO, would check on that to confirm that what they say they're selling them for. We can track that because it's public. It'll become public information. It's not a behind the door sale, so we'd be able to verify that.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a public market for it, so it's all available.
Right.
Councilor Reagan.
Thanks. I just wanted to make a comment that I just think this is really creative, and to see such a regional collaborative is great. And thank you for taking a point on it and getting the grant and breaking this new ground. So I just think it's a win-win around green, money, and from my experience on the city council, the water department has been one of the tightest run ships I've run across, so I'm sure they vetted it up, down, back and forth. So if they're recommending it and just based on how thorough all the documentation is, I think it's a great thing to move forward with. Thank you.
Maybe it'll help you keep your water bills down.
Right?
The commission does a pretty good job at that, Mayor. You know, we may appoint them, but they take the lead, and they've never let us down yet, Billy.
Don't pick on Billy.
David, during your discussions and whatnot, is there any downfall from things that the water department does in these areas? We don't really harvest that much lumber out of the areas that the water department controls, do we?
Well, we do. We do harvesting every year. We have sales every year, and we factored in those sales, and we provided ourselves also a buffer to make sure that there is not a problem with the tonnage that they recorded. So we've been working with Wigmore Forestry Management, and yes, we've included that. So we have taken a hard look at that, and we want to continue with our harvesting project because we do generate revenue anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 in our timber harvesting. So this would augment that.
Okay. But there's no negative impact by doing both?
We don't see any.
Okay.
Yeah, the water department is not, there's no plans at all to ever impact the watershed at all in terms of any kind of development or change in its use. So it's just the forest remains, and we have a management plan that's okayed by the state and run through this same woman. It's it's really a great program, and it has been of no cost to us thanks to Ed and his leadership. He's really the guy that's made this all happen.
Appreciate that.
Michael?
In that harvesting, in the thousands of acres, do you think next year you could find one pine tree for us?
A real one.
Mayor, that's an inside joke. We're not going to get into this.
I think I read about that.
I saw his look, he got it.
It
I
took me
think
a minute, but I
everybody's read
picked
about
up
that
on
one.
it. Yeah.
Thanks to Michael behind you.
Right.
Thank you. I mean, is there any other discussion? This is
Well, the actual agreement is signed by the mayor, but we do need city council.
City council would need to approve it because it's a multi-year agreement over 3 years.
Thank you.
10.
We are approving the multi-year agreement. The negotiations is with the mayor, the cities, between themselves with the water department. And we will do that at our regular meeting is next regular meeting is next Tuesday. And David, is there something you want us to sign, or do you just want the recorded vote from the city clerk?
I believe they need the recorded vote.
Okay.
And then the council of the whole would have to do the same.
Okay. And we'll do whatever, I'm assuming, I shouldn't do that, but the vote is going to be, positive for this, and we'll do whatever is necessary, but that's our timeline.
I do want to say one thing in case there's a concern, not that I want to belabor it. There was one thing added to the back of the intermunicipal agreement, and that was the Exhibit A, just to display how the money would be directed. It's not, it's nothing to the, there's no changes to the legal language other than this. But there was a request from Westfield to define, just so everybody could see an example of how it would go.
So Holyoke is getting $100,241? Hopefully. And so how would that be paid? Once a year, once a quarter?
At a minimum, it'd be annually, but we were negotiating sooner payments, once a quarter. We'll define that for you as the time gets closer. We can follow up with you.
This agreement has been reviewed by City Solicitor Paul Pear. And again, the only change that has been made is the last page. So we just wanted to make sure you were aware of that.
No, like
And
Linda, I'm sorry.
our state solicitor is here too. I meant to say that, Paul. He's got his own mic over there, so we let him stay out there.
Yeah, I wanted to echo, I think either Linda or Michael or somebody had said that, I mean, you guys are one of the tightest ships going. And if you guys have
vetted this out, I'm in favor of it.
Fascinating project, and Mayor, thank you and David and everyone.
Appreciate it.
If there's no other questions or discussion,
Make a motion to approve it.
motion to approve, and again, we'll recommend it to the city council for next week. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That was unanimous.
Thank you, sir, for
Thank you,
coming in.
everyone.
Thank you,
Appreciate
and thank you. I know you had two
Gentlemen.
meetings tonight, and we appreciate it. Well, what do we have, Mark?
That was the good news. Now we have just some other news about some budget issues. You wanna?
All right, the item on the table is the communication. The Water Commission, in a public meeting, is asking to explain to us why this additional $100,000 isn't going to solve all their budget problems. How's that? That's the limit of what the scope of this discussion can be, because we're in a public meeting and the way we
That's
set our agenda.
That's what the agenda is.
Okay.
This is not regarding the update on the program to do the water shut-off for non-payment of sewer charges.
No, don't, I'm sorry, and I've been getting those requests. That is going to be discussed in the ordinance committee with Counselor Bacon.
Okay.
And the reason that's going to be discussed in the ordinance committee is because the sewer rate itself is set by ordinance. So we send everything along that nature into the ordinance committee so that, two committees aren't handling the same item or being redundant about the discussion. And that's why it gets confusing, I understand, but it has a good reason behind it.
Right, but we will need that updated information.
Yes.
Just because it will feed into the discussion on the rates.
Is that okay? Is that, Mark, is that what?
The issue is that there's a payment that we make to the city and another one that the city makes to us for the services we provide, aside from the sewer issue, but just for the ongoing relationship we have with the sewer department and the computer billing and meter reading, et cetera. And that has to do with that same $100,000. I don't know if you want to do that in ordinance or you want to do that
I think
here.
that needs to be ordinance, if I'm getting the gist of what you're saying. It all interconnects. We may have to file
Because there's some payments that are being made and not being made, and there's some issues that need to be discussed in that respect.
But that's not an ordinance.
No, I think we
That
have
would
to
be
file
part of it.
something to connect the dots.
Yeah,
One of them.
That's, the payment in lieu of,
Yeah.
right. And, but there's, not proposed, there's an agreement between the department and the city for the services we provide to the sewer department, which we've provided for the last 20, 30 years. And now there's another agreement which includes the sewer shut-off program. So I will put it any place you want, you just tell us.
then there
Sounds
will
like
need
there's
to
a-
be an order filed
Sounds like
relative
there's
to
an
the other
issue.
matter. Because the only thing sent to ordinance is on the
potential.
rates. There would need,
I'll file an order
there will need to be another order filed.
regards to all payment in lieu of taxes.
And then we'll have one big discussion, which will include Mike McManus. I don't mean to tell you what your committee's doing, but Mike McManus would like to be included in the discussion. He will be there for the sewer rate, and
Right.
and then
Well,
we can connect the dots.
Right, but I want there to be some experience with the contract and the collections first before we take up the rates. Because they won't have any information to give us now. They just started it in April.
Well, the program is supposed to move forward, is moving forward in
Now.
April. Yes,
Correct.
April 15th, which is going to be the starting of the posting of the properties.
Right.
For non-payment of sewer charges.
Right.
And those shut-offs are scheduled to take place in May. Now, we just developed the policies and procedures and the shut-off forms. That was what we had discussed when we had entered into this agreement in December of 2017.
Right.
I know there was some concerns why it took so long to develop the program, and one of the reasons was the leaving of Bill Fuqua. And when
Right.
Mike McManus took over the helm of the DPW, he wasn't able to grasp what was going on here.
Right.
So we essentially took two agreements. We took the sewer billing agreement and we merged it with the shut-off program.
Right.
And had one agreement that defined what the payment was going to be to the water department for both programs.
Right.
And we wanted that to be current with the current administration. And that's what this agreement represents. And I have copies of those agreements if you'd like them.
But the problem is that the payment from the city to the department has not been made, or it's only partial payment has been made. And the program's not supposed to move forward unless the bill is paid in full. So that's the issue.
Okay. So it's a compliance issue.
Well, my understanding from Mike McManus is that the city only appropriated $50,000 for the programs. So he indicated to me that they are going to be seeking some additional funds to cover the expense of $100,000 for fiscal year 18. Well, it's fiscal year 18 is 100,000. Fiscal year 19 is going to be $127,000.
So that will have to be separate
And
orders.
it's all defined in the agreement.
But it will have to be a request from the mayor
Correct.
to the city council.
Correct. So we are still moving forward with the program, that was my understanding, but our concern is if in the event they don't pay us, what do we do with the program at that point in time? So, but we understand the urgency of the program, we understand your concerns.
Okay.
And the water department has been spearheading the program and keeping it moving and working with Mike.
Right.
So that we can start this program and see how effective it is in collecting past sewer charges.
Right.
So
But you
all-
want both sides of the deal to be working. I hear you.
Yep, so my.
So do we.
Yep. So my understanding is that shortfall of money, they will be seeking to reimburse us, and there was also the issue with the pilot, when the new, Brian Smith used to issue invoices for the pilot, and there was, must have been some oversight on the city solicitors, the city auditor who took over at that point never issued any payments or issued any kind of request for payment, so those payments were not made
This is on the other side of the
on the other
contract.
side, yeah. So that's the discussion that we would also have in ordinance committee.
Well, but there's already a contract, and so, through the chair.
No, you're fine, you're fine.
There's
We're-
already a contract, so it's not really a matter for ordinance unless there is a problem with the language. If the contract is in force and it's a matter of the implementation of the contract, then the only originator of a payment to you is from the mayor's office, from the city side. But it's really not an ordinance matter if you already have a signed contract that the council already approved.
I just filed the order, so if it all gets funneled that way.
Okay. We can go,
I
that
think
way.
it's-
We can go the other way, but for payments, it comes out of the mayor's office,
I think it's a need to know.
right?
Right.
Yes, but it's a need to know for, as we're looking at the sewer rate, the big picture of what's going
Well,
on.
sure.
Or what's not going on.
Sure.
And we appreciate it being brought to our attention.
Yes,
We can't
absolutely.
order it, but we can certainly use whatever leverage we can because we needed to make some adjustments, quickly.
Thank you.
Anything else?
That's it for us today, guys.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for double duty tonight. And Joe, it's very nice to meet you. I spoke to you on the phone today for the first time in 39 years. I didn't hear Mike Graney's voice on the other end. Welcome to the city council meeting.
You on the same diet as Dave Conti here?
Didn't they put you on that diet?
Yeah, I'd like to be on that diet. I can start wearing medium shirts too.
All right, thank you.
Thank
Guys,
you.
have a good night now. Thank you.
One more item. And our city solicitor is hung around with us because this one pertains to
Well, it's an interesting.
Motion to
it's an
take up for
interesting way to
discussion
spend
item
the
number 13. This is in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53E and a half. The vacant property revolving fund be amended to authorize that expenditures for professional development and training expenses can come out of that fund. Paul, you want to stick there with your mic, or do you want to come in?
That's fine over here, if you guys can hear me.
Oh, you are chicken, aren't you? We can hear you, and we got the mic for you. So please, could you just run us through this first, and then we can go into some questions and answers.
Sure. So the vacant property revolving fund was established about a year ago. It's a revolving fund established under the state municipal finance laws, and in accordance with those statutory requirements, it specifically defines the expenditures and receipts of the fund. And those expenditures, or rather the receipts, are comprised of ticket fines, vacant building registration fees, costs recovered for code enforcement action for boarding and securing properties, demolishing properties that we're able to recover against owners. That money is deposited into a revolving fund, and from that revolving fund, the Board of Health may make certain expenditures in connection with the objectives of remediating blight and vacancy in the city's property stock. If some of the councilors may recall some of the committee meetings when the proposal was before the council, and part of the conversation was how to keep the revolving fund narrowly tailored to its purpose, and we had some conversations about how other communities have used revolving funds for purchasing equipment, for adding staff, for training expenses, for materials, and in fact, those other communities, reference to it, one of the places we were sort of drawing from was this conference that we had attended, or that I had attended, along with the building commissioner and a member of the Board of Health earlier that year, where this concept was sort of introduced. So that conference comes up every 2 years. It's the Reclaiming Vacant Properties Conference. And the proposal in the revolving fund is to amend the expenditures line item, or the expenditures language, to allow the Board of Health to use those funds for training, professional development costs, but specifically for purposes of paying conference costs for this upcoming conference.
Paul, on the conference, you and I did talk about this, but could you share with the committee the importance of the conference in terms of the issue of demolition, in a city like us? And I think you even cited some of the things that you learned were things that are going on in a much bigger and broader perspective in a city like Detroit. But can you just give us some more detail?
I mean, it's really, I encourage you to check it out online. The organization is called the Center for Community Progress. They're really the preeminent organization in this field. Just from their website, they mentioned that they have 1,000 professionals coming from all across the country. They have about 60 seminars that you're able to select from over the course of 3 days. I mean, it's really good content. It's some of these educational opportunities, the quality can be so-so, but I mean, this is something that the city of Springfield sent a huge squad down there the year that our building commissioner went, which I think was 2013, and it just does a lot of good for not only getting the ideas back to the city, but that synergy of having multiple officials come in.
Joe?
Councilor McGee.
What's in the account now? Total?
I believe the total receipts, I don't have the exact figures, and I know that there have been some expenditures for the recording liens. I believe the total receipts were approximately $32,000, and we're expecting about $10,000 to $12,000 for our recording liens, recording fees for the liens that we recorded with this most recent tax bill, as well as about $9,000 for demolition of some of the properties that were damaged in the Newton Street fire.
And how much is the conference?
So there are funds, of course, set aside in department budgets. So it wouldn't be the full cost, but generally, and I'm not sure how many folks are planning to attend. I think the estimate I had given Councilor McGivern is about 6 to 8. But hotel expenses are $159 per night plus tax. Registration fee is $300. Both of those figures have a sort of early discount. But I'd roughly estimate about 7,000, depending on what other department budget availability might be.
And who are the 6 to 8 people?
Many folks have expressed interest. Again, it's something that their availability is subject to, I think, whether there's funds in the account. But myself, I'm very interested in attending. Attorney Crystal Barnes in her office, who's heading up all the housing court and receivership work. Attorney Chris Urschel, I believe Sarah Meyer-Zimbler in the Office of Planning and Economic Development, who's been really useful in coordinating some of the property disposition strategies across departments. Curtis Weirman, who has done a lot of great work with data integration in the planning department. Sean and Damien, who both attended the Baltimore conference. I might be missing somebody. I'll probably hear about it tomorrow.
All right, and last year when you went, you took it from a certain line item in the budget to pay for your professional development, travel, and all that, correct?
So that was about 2 years ago. I had received a scholarship, and this year we had a scholarship as well, but they only award one per municipality.
So did you request more in your budget this year for education
Yes, I have.
and training?
Yes.
So we wouldn't really have to amend this to achieve the goal, or we have to?
Well, I think, the nature of these, this work with interdepartmental efforts on blight and vacancy requires connecting people from multiple departments. So it's possible to find the money, transfer it in, transfer it out. But I think at the end of the day, in terms of what an effective use of revolving fund expenditures would be, and I know the Board of Health has had other training opportunities that arose that they were interested in pursuing. I think it's a worthwhile objective. It's just a matter of how do you tailor the language or define that narrow use.
And that's the key. That's what I'm driving at. How is it being tailored to limit the use? Because here's the whole purpose. When it came to us a year ago, we tabled it twice to get more information on it, and then ultimately agreed on the simple principle that we understand when the money comes in, it's only been a year and you're saying it's about $32,000. That should be an eye-opener. And more money's coming in, which then we were going to use for Board of Health for dealing with, as we all get the phone calls, mowing the lawn, buttoning up a building, fixing it because their line item was always short. So we understood the concept of taking money, coming back in and pushing it out to help without having to always come back to us or not properly doing the budget correctly, which then was, it's a revolving account. There is no accountability to us. Once the money goes in, it just can go out without our authority or our overview, which now is, We went from that concept to now opening it up to deal with potentially professional development and training, which is a line item budget that we have to watch each and every year to make sure we're accounting for it correctly. Now it's opening up to, well, it's going into a revolving fund, we'll never see it again. And if you want, you can take that money out to deal with this. I get the interconnection with other departments. To me, the revolving account here was specifically for vacant property in dealing with it through the Board of Health. That's how it was pitched to us. That's how we amended it to tailor it to deal with that issue. Now we're going outside that scope. I have a huge problem with that. If you need professional development and training expenses, you put it in a line item, we all address it, of which I'm still, this is now the 5th time I've asked for it. Why can I not get each and every department head to send us their budget requests for the budget? It's the 5th time. We as a council voted unanimously to have that happen. Did you send yours yet?
I have.
Where is it?
It's in an email.
To who?
Counselor McGivern, I believe, at least.
When?
I could check.
Yeah, I mean, we don't send it to Ryan, we don't send it to me, we all the counselors. Still haven't gotten it.
If I could respond just to the, I recognize that. I mean, I recognize the concern about using a revolving fund for any purpose that's not specified, and of course, that's why I'm here to suggest a conversation about it. I think the practical reality is that education and training expenses in the city are grossly underfunded, and frankly, at the end of the day, in any municipality, there are line items that get poached, and this is an issue that's important, and it's an issue that, you know, if we want to see real solutions to these problems, having that as an available resource for, if it's a limited percentage of receipts, if it's a cap, but I think it's something to send a message to city staff that have an interest in pursuing education in that area. It's a worthwhile expenditure, but I do recognize the accountability factor and where it could lead, you know, 3, 4, 5 years.
Thanks. I would just like to speak on this briefly, but I think before we would want to be looking to expand the scope of the revolving fund, we'd want to understand what is the status of the training lines in each department for which the people want to go to the workshop, so that we could understand, all right, if there are 6, 7, or 8 people and it's important that they all go, and I don't know how long they'd be gone, but I hope there's somebody left in the departments to do day-to-day. We would, I think, need to know which departments are short, how much is in their training line, how much has been used, how much needs to come out of the fund, because there are lines and nothing has come to us saying they're depleted, that, at least that I'm aware of. Maybe something's come to finance that I don't know about. So I think we would need to know why we would be doing this, because to Councilor McGee's point, we don't see any accounting out of the revolving fund. It just becomes its own, and I think that's been some of Councilor McGivern's objections to the revolving funds. So I'd be very hesitant to expand it into something so general that could be used for almost anything. Thank you.
Well, this particular revolving fund, which department takes the lead in oversight?
That's the Board of Health.
And I think the Board of Health needs to answer some of our questions, or answer some of the questions we've heard this evening, and maybe itemize what they've been using it for in terms of expenses to date. So we have a better, if, you know, there's any thoughts of changing the language, I think councilors need to know the full picture. And, you know, as I'm sitting here and I'm listening to what's being said, you know, open-ended language, the intent, I think, is understood. The intent is fine. But, you know, if you're gonna do something, we'd have to, be able to cap it at some, you know, some point, and not a dollar, maybe a dollar figure cap, not a percentage. Only because it's such a new, new frontier in terms of a revolving fund. And there's been a lot of arguments, and I'll just clarify, my objections to revolving funds are when you take things into a revolving fund, the source is easy to identify, but the revenue is often for day-to-day operations. And if we take the revenue directly into a revolving fund, it misses that part of what we call balancing the budget, even though it's paying for an expense that's legit and worthy. At the same time, because we don't let it go through the normal process, it looks like we have less revenue than we do. Same thing with grants, but, you know, grants we can't control, revolving funds we can. But could you get us some information from Brian, like a breakdown of what has happened so far?
Absolutely,
And
yeah.
maybe even what he's projecting to use it for, if that makes any sense. Any other discussion? Anything else, Paul, you wanted to add at this point?
Nope, I'll get that information, and I appreciate the feedback.
Okay, and thank you for spending the evening. I knew there probably wouldn't be questions, but that water department, I'm glad they mentioned that you were part of it.
It's
And
a very
I'm sure the
novel
mayor's gonna
approach.
wanna hear from you and the, you know, as he's looking forward to his signature and our vote on it itself. On the motion, table, all those in favor? Any opposed? We got some tentative dates coming up, so keep your Mondays open, because we gotta get this done before the budget comes in front of us. We're pretty clean. There's a couple items that we've left in here, still waiting for some answers, which I will follow up on, including Grin and Barrett. Okay, Paul, you said it on record. I do have an email from you with your budget request. I hope so. I don't know why you just sent it to me though, but we also did get something from the auditor, which is the same thing that, well, there's the spreadsheets that, which is the spreadsheets that we get for the budget itself, is the same thing that Paul sent me.
I'll be honest, I didn't know about it until I was watching it at home, and I think that's why I just sent it to Joe, because, you know.
Okay, I just looked at it as, why the hell is he sending it to me, and information for me? I didn't pick up on it until you just said that, but it is here in the trusty iPhone. Chair sees nothing else to talk about. Motion to adjourn. All those in favor? Any opposed? We are adjourned.
Keep them on.